So far, we have discussed about different ways of executing a program, what is asynchronous, synchronous, and parallel programming. And also we discussed what is Node.js, how it was extracted out from the browser. I mean, how we separated Google's Chrome V8 engine and we made a standalone JavaScript environment where Node.js is not a programming language or a framework of JavaScript, but indeed it's a runtime environment or a place or a container where your JavaScript code is run on the backend or on the backend technology side, right? So now it is time to understand what exactly is the architecture of Node.js, right? So how when a request comes into the Node.js system or a application which is written into the Node.js system, then how it's going to uh, travel and what is the journey of it from in the entire request response cycle, right? So let's look at that. Yes. So this is on a high level the Node.js system or the architecture of Node.js, right? So if you see here, the application, whatever we are writing, it takes the request and then the entire request is comprising of V8 engine where your JavaScript code is executed, compiled, interpreted, and stuff like that. And then you have a Node.js binding API. So this is the core. As I said, if you recollect, in the browser, along with the JavaScript V8 engine, there will be other add-ons like which is adding event timers, I mean making asynchronous AJAX calls and stuff like that, right? So what happens is in a Node.js system also, along with Google's V8 engine, we need to add more powers which make it a full-fledged backend application or backend programming technology, right? So here, if you see, the Google's V8 Chromite engine is here. So when you write a piece of JavaScript code, first it enters into the V8 engine and then it is compiled, I mean, using the compilation of JIT, right? So, I don't know. So JIT compiler or JIT is the compilation thing which happens in JavaScript, JIT. It is called as just in time compilation. So technically JavaScript is an interpreted language. That's what people call it. It means it doesn't throw any error and there is no compile time error because it doesn't go through compilation. But if you look at carefully, there is a two-step thing which happens in JavaScript also, that is compilation happens at the time of runtime only. So that's why we call it as just-in-time compilation. So when you are executing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines of code, 1, 2 lines, when the code execution has reached a third point, it already has compiled. So I mean, it compiles the first line and then runs it. It compiles the first line, then runs it. So it's like there are two phases in JavaScript. First one is compilation, and second one is interpretation. Right? So to show you that, to verify you that, let me run a small example, right? So element is equal to 10 and var element. So what I am doing is, see, in interpretation phase your code is executed, right? In interpretation phase your code is executed, and in compilation phase it is compiled for various errors, various syntactical errors and stuff like that, right? So what I am doing here is I'm running a code where I'm declaring a variable after the initialization. It means I am trying to use a variable even with before declaration. So that's what I'm trying to do here. So I'm trying to use a variable even before the declaration, and ideally it should throw me an error because at this point of time when the code is being executed, it should have var element declared, right? So if you see here, when I run this code, 10, it didn't give me any error technically, and it ran successfully and the element 10 has been successfully print. This is called as JavaScript hoisting. So it's all again JavaScript concept, but just to show you that hoisting. So what happens is in JavaScript hoisting, all the declarations will move forward. So I said in two phases. So in first phase, in the compilation phase, it moves all the declarations to the top, and in interpretation phase, it executes the code from the previous step. So that's the reason. And this process is called as hoisting, JavaScript hoisting. So what's happening is it moves all the declarations to the top, and then your interpretation phase happens, and then it runs the code. But when you compare with any other Java or any programming language, first you generate some bytecode, or by running it in a compiler like javac, you run this command, right? Javac, and you give the class name, it compiles into some code, and then you execute that piece of code. So it is in two phases, but in JavaScript, it happens compilation and interpretation in the same phase itself. So that's what happens inside the Google's V8 Chrome engine. And now when your code is being written, you might interact with many other things, right? So that's what comes over here. So this libub is the core heart or brain or anything. All the important parts of a body can be represented with this libub. This is a C++ library, or if you ask me, NodeJS is equal to V8 engine plus libub. So these are C++ libraries. So NodeJS is not entirely written in C++. It is only a part of which it is written in C++, and some part of it has been written in JavaScript as well. So if you see the code of V8 engine, let's go and see, right? So let's go and see the V8 engine's code. Let's look at the Node.js code and what it is and what the library says about it. So Node.js GitHub, right? So I'm trying to go into the Node.js GitHub. So if you can see here, it says that it is a Node.js, or it is the runtime environment. Node.js is an open source cross-platform JavaScript runtime environment. So this is the official website of Node.js, right? So if you see, Node.js is not just written in TypeScript or written in C language. If you see here, these are the all .h header files, right? So all these are the C++ files. If you open something, so it is all combination of C, C++ and everything. But what I meant to say is, it's not just C++ over here, but there are also few JavaScript files. So see here, so it is combination of both JavaScript and C++, right? So that's what Node.js is for us. So it's a combination of both the languages which are written. So yep, so that's what Node.js is for us, right? Now, to understand the architecture, so V8 engine is actually interacting with these C++ libraries with the Node.js binding. So there are some bindings which happen, like you can say an interface, or you can say some pipelines wherein the data exchange between the V8 engine, because now JavaScript code has to talk to the libub modules, or the actual core problem or core stuff of Node.js, right? We'll see what is that. So it's all through the bindings, and it's an OS operation. This part is only the connection between these two. I mean, that's what makes Node.js stand out, or that's what makes out Node.js to bring and run in the backend environment, right? So if you see here, libub is very powerful, very powerful. It contains, I mean, if you really deep dive into libub or the asynchronous part of, so you must have recollect asynchronous programming, asynchronous IO, right? So asynchronous means switching between the tasks, context switching, right? So LIBUV mainly consists of event queue and event loop, which runs infinitely, and worker threads. So worker threads is one important thing, please remember that, and execute callbacks. So see, event loop is doing something. Let's see what is it doing. Let's understand it by example. And yeah, so basically node.js is a single threaded environment, right? So node.js, what is node.js? If you ask me, node.js is a single threaded asynchronous event driven technology. Node.js is a single threaded asynchronous event driven, right? So what does that mean? So Node.js runs on a single thread, first thing. Okay, so it doesn't have multiple threads, but here again the confusion starts. Worker threads, right? So Node.js execution is equal to LIBUV, which contains event queue. We'll see what is event queue. Event loop, we'll understand what is event loop. Worker threads, and yeah, this is what Node.js is. I mean, there are different phases in it. We can understand it, in the advanced concept of Node.js. But yeah, so what happens? What happens when a request comes in, right? So whenever a request comes in, what Node.js does is it takes that request and puts it in the event queue. So right away, it takes any request and puts it in the event queue. Now, what is the event loops work, right? Event loops continuously, it's an infinite loop. Just think of it as an infinite loop. What it does is it takes the event queue, functions in the event queue, whatever request it has come, and it identifies. So event loop runs on this single thread, main thread, right? Main thread. So event loop is the one which is assigning the task. Event loop is assigning the tasks, right? Main thread, we have one main thread where the event loop runs. So whenever a request comes in, it goes straight into the event queue, and whenever there is a message in the event queue, it's a queue, normal queue, first FIFO, first in, first out. Event loop takes that and it checks. So event loop checks, is the work a blocking operation? We'll see what is blocking operation, or non-blocking. So blocking operation means what it is blocking. So when I say operation work, it's a blocking operation. What it is blocking? It is blocking the main thread, right? And non-blocking, it's some tasks are non-blocking. It means they can be assigned to someone else. They can be assigned to someone else. So what is event loop all doing? Event loop is just identifying whenever there is a request comes in, it takes out that request from the event queue. So now even hundreds of requests comes, they all go into the event loop, event queue, and event loop continuously checks that event queue and find out the operation and then segregates it. Is it a blocking operation or non-blocking operation? So you can call it anytime, anything. So if it is blocking operation, right? If it is blocking operation, so if it is blocking operation, blocking the main thread, then it assigns those blocking operations to the worker thread. So blocking operations are assigned to the worker thread. So in my previous, it's not the non-blocking, it's the blocking operations are assigned to the worker thread, assigned to worker threads, and non-blocking are kept itself. Okay, so what are the different blocking operations? What are the different blocking operations? We need to identify that, right? Event loop identifies them. So file reading, because this is going to take some time. So whenever there is an operation which is going to take some time, then main thread event loop puts it in a separate or handles that work to somebody else. Okay, file reading, DB operation, then we have network call, these three, right? File reading, DB operation, and network call, right? So if you see here, file system, network, and process, DB process. So all these are certain operations, or those operations which are gonna take some time to execute. So instead of blocking our main thread, event loop assigns them to the individual worker threads so that their work is going to be done by the worker threads itself, and main thread is not going to worry about it. But now you might ask a doubt, or you might already think about a doubt that, okay, let's say the request which comes in says that first read a file, upload or write to database, make an API call, and then respond back to the user about the status, right? So this is what the request is. So in this request, we need to first read a file, then write to database, and make an API call to some external service, and then respond back user. So user starts here, right? So what Node.js does is, so what other systems does, or what Node.js does, it takes that request and puts it in the event queue, and event loop identifies that the first operation is a read file, right? So it registers in this worker threads and assigns a callback function. So what is callback now? Callback function is nothing, it's pretty simple. Callback function is a function which is executed once your operation is done. It's like when your mother says that turn off the motor or something, then she asks you after turning off, please let me know. So that is called as callback. So what it means that your mother has assigned to you some work, and that after completing that work, what you have to do so that your work is done. So your work is not just turning off the motor, but also to inform her by calling her. So that's what callback function is. So while you are registering itself, while your mother gives you a work, at the same time she also gives you a callback function, says that, hey bro, once this is done, please call this function so that I'll be notified and I can continue with my next task. So that way, what event loop does is, whenever it sees a blocking operation, that operation is registered in the worker threads, and while registering, it assigns a callback, which is then, after the file system completes its operation, along with the data, along with the file data or whatever data, it puts back in this queue, in the event queue again, and event loop then picks up, okay, I have got the data, now what is my next operation in the request? Write to database. Again, it's a blocking operation and that blocking operation is assigned to worker thread again, and the same process continuously happens. So event loop, the task of event loop is always trying to empty the event queue, okay? And while assigning the task to worker thread, it registers a callback which is later picked by the same event loop. So that's it. So who is the main leader of here? Event loop is the one. He is doing all the tasks, and he is assigning the works to whoever person it is concerned with, and that's how he's playing a lead role in the entire Node.js architecture. So let me get again. So when a user starts, or when a request journey starts, of first reading a file and writing to a database and making an API call and then respond back to the user about the status. So first the JavaScript code is executed. It allocates a memory for the various variables and stores in that. And with the help, whenever in the JavaScript executed code, the machine code or whatever code it is generating, it is then put into the event queue. Event queue is a queue where it stores or collects all the requests, and it doesn't wait any user. It doesn't stop any user, non-blocking. And event queue is continuously monitored by a superhero. He is called as event loop, and he continuously monitors it. Now, with the event loop is the superhero which is identifying the blocking task and non-blocking task, and or assigning the blocking operations to the worker threads. And while assigning the task to them, he is also giving them a callback function which should be called only when the work of that file system has been done. So while executing that particular worker, I mean that worker is executing some task, then if it is encountering any problem, through that callback it will inform us. So let's say I wanted to turn off the motor, but even before that the motor is turned off because of the power supply, then I will get to know, I'll inform that using this callback function, which acts as a bridge between the worker and the producer, I mean whoever has assigned the task, owner, right? That way node event loop continuously monitors the event queue and checks the execute callbacks, and it registers callbacks and it executes them continuously until a request operation is ended. And you can see that any number of requests are now directly pushed into the event queue, and event loop is so fast that it completes all the tasks, right? So while we have seen the blocking calls like this, file reading, DB operation, network call, all these blocking operations where it takes some time to get back the response, right? So file reading, it might be a lengthy file. DB operation, the DB should be connected to our application. Network call, the network should respond back to us. Similarly, blocking operations, or which puts load on main thread, right? Which puts load on main thread. Those are infinite loops, and which are going to use CPU power other than the worker threads. So this is a bad code. So if your application is running some infinite loops which are going to put some load on the CPU, then your event loop is always engaged in doing a single task instead of assigning it to the worker threads, and it's never gonna pick up the new requests that are coming into the event queue, and that's how the entire application goes for a toss. Always remember that you can write a very good Node.js code, or you can write a very worst Node.js code. So understanding how the architecture is and how it interacts with different entities inside the architecture is very important, and is going to play a crucial role in the entire development process, right? So that's all about Node.js and Node.js architecture. Let's move on to understanding what is the difference between multi-threaded and why. So Node.js being a simple single-threaded, and when you can compare with multi-threaded environment, why is even Node.js sustaining? A single-threaded programming language is competing with multi-threaded, and in fact it is winning over multi-threaded. Why is it? We need to understand it very well. We'll next see it in the coming videos.